Hello, I'm Malcolm Gallagher of BV-TV Network. I've got three things in common with my guest today. I love technology, I love skiing, and I sold it as a tour operator, and I love wine. And my guest today brings all three in one interview. He's currently, though, on a mission to defog the elitist world of wine for all of us. He's recently launched the Palate Club, which I'll be chatting to him about. But let's waste no tasting time and go straight to saying hello to Nicolas Mendiharat. Welcome, Nicolas.
Hello, Malcolm. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, listen, you are in that rather beautiful area in France. Aix-en-Provence, is that correct?
Yeah, we are right now in Aix-en-Provence, and I spend my time between San Francisco, California, and Aix-en-Provence usually.
Ah, right. I just wanted to get a little nibble in here, though. You know, you're supposed to be in sunny France, but it ain't sunny there today, and it is here in the northeast of England. Listen, I did say, by the way, I hope people don't get me mistaken as my introduction about skiing and wine and technology. We don't do them all in the same time, do we?
I hope not. I mean, we can try.
Anyways, Nicolas, thanks for guesting on the BV-TV network, especially with our Web30 BV-TV Special, as we celebrate what the web has done and will do for us. You've pioneered in technology from ski vacations to wine, but what's also exciting is your future thinking around technology. Before we move into our main chat, though, Nicolas, for our viewers and our listeners, can you sort of briefly tell us who is Nicolas Mendiharat and the key points of your career journey so far in respect of technology? And what is the Palate Club?
Sure. Pleasure, and thanks for having me. Well, I'm a French-German citizen living in the US now since 6 years. I graduated from the ESCP school in Paris. That was a while ago. And I've been, since then, a consumer internet entrepreneur, how you name it, like serial entrepreneur kind of. So this is my fifth company, Palate Club. So this is about wine. I've built mainly ventures where technology enables disruptions or changes in different industries. The main one was Ski Horizon. At the time, I started that in 1999. So that was still the early days of the internet, where travel was one of the hot things. Now everything is hot, basically. Yes. And travel is already online, probably more than 80%, but there's still a lot of new stuff in travel as well. So I moved from different industries. I also did a recommendation engine. I worked, with data science. I also angel invested in a few companies. It's good to have a little bit the two sides. Europe is usually a little bit slower in matter of, beginning and embracing innovation than America, but it's actually catching up a lot. And I think there's a convergence. So I'm in that convergence, between California and France and Europe more generally. So yeah, I'm a pure breed entrepreneur. My entire business career has been building companies and leading them in different consumer fields, mainly consumer.
Yeah. Listen, I want to ask you a cheeky question here. As a German, German background, and in living in France, and now living in California, which of the three have the best wines?
Well, Germany has amazing Rieslings and ice wine, which sometimes can beat, the actual craziness of Burgundy wines, for instance. And some people like those. They're actually very light in alcohol, and they're delightful. Besides that, I don't think Germany is so well known for their wines. They have more interesting wines, including in England, in your home country. There is more good white wine now. I think you can make good wine in many countries now, which was not the case 30, 40 years ago. Now you have good wine everywhere. Then if you come to the big producing countries, and your hard question, do I prefer, or is there a better wine in California and France? Well, then I will pitch you back what my company does, Palate Club. It depends on your taste, and it's all about your taste.
Yeah.
So there are so many different wines in California and in France, and it's hard to generalize, and I hate to generalize. So my personal taste is more French. I don't think it's too much related to the fact that I grew up here. It's more linked to my palate, and maybe it is also because your palate is built throughout the years towards what you've tasted. It's a very complicated process, what you actually like and don't like and which combination. But I'm more earthy, kind of less fruity, less sweet, more drier, more tannins type of guy. And yeah, in France, there are a lot of those particular great wines, but I love wines from some of them as well.
I've got to say here, Nicolas, that's diplomatically said. Yep.
Well, it's funny because we see with our, number of ratings and taste clusters, and anyway, we're going to talk about it, that actually the typical taste of California is what you call the typical taste of Napa, which is heavy, full-bodied, kind of oaky, etc. Is suited perfectly for 25% of the American drinkers, red wine drinkers, out of 12,000 different people, and we have in the database. When we conducted tests in Europe, we came up with the same ratio, 25%. So, again, is the wine better or not better? In the end, that's, the judgment call of better wines is more something I let to wine critic professionals. I'm here actually to make wine accessible, understandable, and particularly matched for everyone's taste.
Excellent. Yeah.
That seems a little bit the same in both countries, and that's interesting because it's not something we knew before we started this venture.
Yeah, I love what you're doing about the Palate Club, as you say, to reduce to defog it and take away the elitist. Let's move into part one of my chat with you. Can you remember when you were first grabbed by technology, especially the World Wide Web? What sparked your desire to use it so effectively as you've done throughout your career?
Yeah, now to answer that question, the most accurately, I would do a little French trick here, is that we had the Minitel, which was the premise of the internet. It was a sort of intranet, if you want. For the Americans who have never heard about the Minitel, there was the Betamax in Germany as well. It was like a terminal which was directly on your telephone copper line, and you would ping servers and have access to certain services. By the way, travel was already hot there. You could book your train ticket, your airplane discounted ticket, and things like that. And that was really before the internet became something. So we're really talking about, if I get it right, mid of the 80s. And as I love to say to my Californian friends, at that time we had the Minitel, and we already had the TGV, where they didn't figure out yet how to build a fast train between Los Angeles and San Francisco, despite I love the country there. So sometimes France was actually very much in advance in technology. And so at that moment, that was kind of the beginning where I loved, when I was, I don't know, was it 12 or something, I loved to go on the terminal and try to figure out every server. The problem is the cost was like equivalent to today, probably about $10 a minute. So my parents wouldn't be very happy if I spent some time there. And of course it was terrible design and everything, but that moment was very important for me because it was the moment where I started to access to computers, and I think I somehow understood that this would be a game changer in everything we would do. I didn't understand that this would be smartphones and everything as it became, but I was very intrigued, and I was definitely very interested.
I think the speed of development is incredible, isn't it? But when I was at Thomson Holidays way back in 1972, we used to have a computer that was about, I don't know, 20 meters long almost, just to print the airline tickets. Ridiculous, isn't it? Now, what can be achieved, and also, are you going to be able to bring taste to the screen soon?
Well, this is where things get, what is it what you can't make digital today? There's probably a lot of things, but still. When I started Palate Club, obviously, a lot of people say, what are you going to do, like taste in your smartphone? Well, I said, you know what? It's actually one of the only things which there's no such thing as digital taste, right? We measure everything about ourselves. We have access to, almost every senses. It's with the phone, but taste is not gone digital at all. So it's also why I was very interested in that. So, in things wine, it's so complicated, and taste is very complicated. If you look at research, scientific research about taste goes a long way. There's a lot of studies on everything. It's very complicated because it's linked to smell, and smell has so many factors. There are cycles, and there's smell is, as you know, different when you're a child and when you're grown up. And wine is also very, very complex, right? There's like so many grapes and blends and ways to make wines and terroirs, and there's a problem to solve as well. How do I access the best wine, the best deal when I go into a shop? If you don't have a PhD degree in wine, it's actually impossible to always get the best product for yourself. And most of the people think they know about wine, they actually don't know. You just do. It's a humility factor, but you do blind tasting with all sorts of people who think they prefer Bordeaux, and then they choose Bordeaux. The fifth bottle out of 5. That happens all the time. So it's really hard to know. So how do you figure that out? Since I worked a little bit in data science before, I asked a bunch of mathematicians and expert sommeliers if we can build a model out of data where we know we would never reach perfection, but at least we make it better. So, and we did that model, and now I'm pretty proud to say after a couple of years, it works because we have the data to prove it, since the average rating, once we have algorithmified your taste, basically increases by 30% and we're talking about blind tasting.
Yeah, so let's just tease people on that for part 2, by the way, because just before we move into part 2, Nicolas, I'd just like to remind viewers and listeners of your website URL. Now, viewers, you can see it on the screen behind me, but for listeners, I'm going to help you on this one here, because this is Palate Club, palateclub.com. Now, palate is Palate, palate as in mouth, not palate as in artistry, and not Pilates. It's palate.com. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. You kindly sent me a little note, and you have a little vanity URL for people who've got trouble spelling palate, haven't you? What's that little vanity?
Yeah. So since our main tagline is "Your Taste Matters," we have chosen mytastematters.com as a vanity.
My taste matters without a doubt. But so I like Palate. I like Palate Club, palateclub.com. I can manage that one. So, Nicolas, let's move into this bit where you're talking about the innovation you're making in the world of wine. So, tell us about the taste matching technology. Taste matching technology. Is it suitable for a layman slurper like me, or a wine sipper and sophisticate like Kim, my wife? Well, that's a lie, but she's just as big a slurper as I am.
It's suitable for everybody who has a minimum interest in good wine. Okay? Right. So if you drink wine and for you it's just booze and you don't make a difference, you don't think you will anytime soon make a difference, you actually prefer to have a beer and whiskey, but you're just it's not gonna be very interesting for you. But if you're like a wine freak, connoisseur, if you're just a wine beginner, but you really like wine, then it's definitely for you. It's just all different steps. Even if you're like a master sommelier or master of wine, you might actually be interested what we figure out. So it works with 200 traits and descriptors, which you find in wine and taste. And they're reorganized. There have been 24 iterations of everything, how they're reorganized by priority, etc. Some of which are professional ones, hidden ones in the data model people won't even see, such as structure or complexity. So the way it works is every bottle we decide to enter in the portfolio is tasted by professional sommeliers, which are trained for that, and they enter in the back end of our system about 25 to 30 traits, which correspond to that wine. So, and usually it's 2 to 3 tasters. So we have, they can detect a little bit better certain flavors when we go into the details. Then we ship the bottles in blind taste mode, which means it starts with a box of half bottles, which are wrapped by a tissue, very light tissue. You can cheat, of course, and put it away, but that's not the point. And a secret bottle number. And every bottle we ship afterwards, it also comes that way. So you don't know if it's a Chateauneuf du Pape, a Napa, or whatever else, which is much better. Initially, we have done this to avoid the bias of the label, which is a very strong bias. There's been many tests doing this way, and you will not rate the bottle the same way once you've seen the label. The thing is, it makes actually the experience fun, and people are having a lot of fun. So we figured that on the way. So we kind of gamified the experience as well. So the only thing we ask our customers to do is to rate from 1 to 5 in our app, which is quite simple. You can, try to guess the grape and the AVA and everything else, but we only ask for your rating and really, the genuine way of how you feel it. And with 4 ratings, which usually are with 4 bottles of red or 4 whites, there are 2 tracks, and which are, of course, very eclectic, very different wines. We kind of start to put you on the map. It doesn't mean we know everything about you, about your taste, but we know a lot thanks to the other dozens of thousands of ratings and the fact that we already see taste clusters of, combination of taste in different people. I know cluster is a bad word these days, but it's the way you use it in data science. So for instance, it is not about a simple trait. Wine is not that simple. It's not about, you like sweetness or you like acidity. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes people they have a very strong trait, but it's usually a combination. And this is where things get complicated, right? It's about, that person likes, strong tannins with low acidity, and they like it much better if there is a lot of black fruit. And if there's earthiness, then, it's a blast. So the way we go into the details, obviously, is with more bottles. And the way it works, it's a wine club. So the business part it's a subscription model available in the US only so far, but very soon in Europe. Is you choose, it's the only basically club or wine service where you don't have to choose bottles anymore. We do it for you with a satisfaction guarantee since we know your taste, which means the algorithms will, of course, it's helped with professional human sommeliers, but will pick up the wines according to your price point and according to your frequency and number of bottles. You can change that anytime. And so you will get new numbers. So it's a discovery way for wine, including if you know wine pretty well. You will have usually smaller wineries, artisan winemakers, usually organic. We go really to the good stuff, which has good value at the start. And then we match it. So you will receive wine number 123 and wine number 679. And again, there will be in blind mode. And again, you can rate them from 1 to 5. And the more you rate, the more we know about your taste. It takes about 10 to 15, depending on the people, 10 to 15 ratings to really know precisely a lot about your palate. We'll never know everything because, it's endless. There's endless possibilities. It's kind of an infinite world. But we know a lot, so we can precisely measure things now. And I think we're the only ones doing it that way, at least. There are, stupid marketing gimmicks such as quizzes, like if you like dark chocolate, you will like that type of wine. But, any wine expert will tell you that is completely yes.
Yeah. So if you know more about me, which I'm happy with that. Obviously, some people are not happy with people knowing much about them, especially if they think they're drinking too much and their company is going to know about it. However, my taste changes. especially within the weather. You know, I like my reds in the winter with my roast beef and that. It, as I said to you before, it's lovely sunshine and hot here. We would like a very nice rosé at the end of the day, sitting in the sunshine and everything like that. And I know, and I'm a Chardonnay and places like that. So how can you help me in the future, almost by reminding me that the summer weather's coming? Because otherwise, you know, I'm just going and buying whatever the supermarket tells me, almost, aren't I?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Like I said, it's not a perfect science. So we'll never know everything. We'll never know what the exact temperature of serving is the wine behind the rating, because we're not going to ask that from the customer unless, you know, kind of thing that's very boring. It's too much demanding. There are a lot of things we can factor in the algorithms, such as including weather, which is data available, by the way, and location. But like typically summer and winter, we know that has an effect. And so we can factor that in. We actually are starting to factor those type of things in. We can also factor in, you know, your average rating compared to the other average ratings. For instance, you have people who rate pretty high, generally speaking, and others who rate pretty low. So, and that you need to level it as well. 2-star rating or 3-star rating doesn't mean the same thing with the same, you know, different persons. So the context matters a lot, and they can be so many things affecting your rating. So sometimes we will be wrong. So like I said, it's not perfect science. What I can tell you is that on the average, once we algorithmify your profile, the average rating goes from 3.2 to 4. So we increase 30% the satisfaction of the consumers. And again, that's in blind taste mode. I expect to go higher than that. In certain cases, you know, even if we give advice about, you know, serving wine at that temperature and this and that, we will get it wrong, or the consumer will not do as is expected. It is what it is. There is a very big neuroscience factor. We've worked with neuroscientists from Institut Pasteur as well, which has given us a lot of background on the effect of wine on our senses, and they've conducted a lot of very interesting experiments. For instance, one I remember is if you walk in a restaurant room and they painted the walls in yellow, the average number of people ordering white wine increases 35%. So so of course you're all the time, you know, you're bounced with all sorts of context and things which will affect psychologically or physically your taste or your satisfaction, or, you know, even if you probably if you're in a bad mood or good mood, you will give a different rating, while the wine and the context is exactly the same, right? So we know that's the thing. Is also why this experiment and this venture is a lot of fun, because we're venturing in a world which is limitless in what we can do, because we know we will never reach the perfection. Doesn't exist there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and as they say, a day without wine is a day, you know, a day without sunshine. But what fascinates me about what you're doing as well, and my mind is whirring as we're talking there, you know, going back to our sort of mutual interest in travel. And before I go to places, whether I'm speaking or whether I was doing tour operating, I like to learn about the wines beforehand to be able to not make a mistake there, you know, to make some good choice and everything. And I've always found that hard to do. Yes, I can search engine and everything, but surely as you keep developing the Palate Club, you're going to be able to help me, because you will know my taste and be able to tell me if I go to Australia or Algeria, whatever it may be, what I should be looking and tasting for, shouldn't you?
Absolutely. This is what we do. We deliver your profile. We tell you which classical wine matches out of 140 different regions and typical tastes are best matches for you. We do that not only for our own portfolio, where we're precise. We deliver a percentage of match for every bottle, a little bit like next. But for classical winemakers, obviously, once you know your taste through the app, there's a lot of details. So you're going to know much better if you travel more particularly. But it's why I did it in the first place. When I arrived in California more than 6 years ago, I was a wine passion guy, and I know pretty well my stuff about French wines. But then I was in front of all the other wines of the world.
Yes.
Because in the US, you have a pretty
Zinfandel and things like that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very interesting because there are a lot of different tastes, but I felt like an idiot because suddenly, I thought after 20 years of, wine experience, etc., I would figure it out. And it's just too much. There's literally 2 million labels in the US. There's 225,000
Wow.
every year. So, and they come from everywhere, and there's only in the US alone there's 10,000 wineries, right? Which everyone produces usually a few different SKUs and a lot of smaller ones and different experiments. And when you know a little bit of winemaking techniques, you know that there are hundreds of decisions all year long. The winemaker actually, like I like to call them, the artist winemaker, actually does for the final product, and then that product evolves over time. I mean, it's impossible. So. Even if you're a professional, professionals get it wrong many times. There have been tastings where in black glasses where professionals will confuse red and the white because you don't see the color. So the reality is there's just too much. So this is where we come in, and this is where we guide you. At least you'll know much better about your taste. And I think the biggest problem of the industry is that it's a product pushed industry. It has never been really focused around the consumer. And so to avoid that choice problem and that ultra diversity problem, to make it easier for the consumer, the industry has given a lot of gimmicks. So they have invented wine critics, but then you don't necessarily have the taste of the wine critic. And a wine critic, which is drinking a lot of wine during the year, will do maximum 4,000 tastings. So, it is what it is. Then they have done the grapes. So they've tried to explain to you wine by the grapes, which works for cheaper wines. But the reality is, grapes, it really depends where it's grown, the winemaker and everything else. And then they've done all sorts of other like medals this and medals that. They've never made a calculation about what is your taste. It's basically, it was you to figure it out. And that is a very hard thing to figure out. For a few people, it might be fun to take 30 years and to read a lot of things about wine to figure out your taste. But I don't think it's the future. The future is that technology will help you do that. It doesn't mean you're stupid. On the contrary, you'll become smart about your taste thanks to data.
I think it's a terrific, absolutely terrific way of using technology to help us learn faster. And that's what most of us want to do. As you quite say, we can't go through 4,000 tastings. Nicolas, my final part stays with wine. Is the wine market finally moving online and losing its elitism? How did it stay offline in the USA until the pandemic? So what's the pandemic really changed?
Well, there are two questions. There's, will it move online? How fast does it do? And particularly in the US, it's the latest of all markets to move online. It was less than 2% in 2019. So the pandemic has accelerated, like kind of doubled that, but it's still less than 5%. And the reason for that, as opposed to like in China, it's 25%. In Europe, it's more or less 9 to 10%. The reason for that is mainly regulations in the three-tier system, because in the US, it's still the alcohol law of post-prohibition time of 1943. That's the 21st Amendment, which basically says states can regulate the way they want as long as they respect the three-tier system, which means the wine is moving from one to the next, which means that a lot of intermediaries want to keep their money-making position by just moving cases and not giving access in the interest of the consumer, not opening the market. So recently, there's been a number of Supreme Court rulings which make that a little bit more liberal. There are, because of that federal and state system, There are lawsuits all over the place currently in the US and all the time. And, lawmakers of states sometimes come up with ridiculous outcomes because, their campaign was paid by the alcohol lobby. That's the reality. And all these is bad for the consumer. The consumer in the US pays like a high price there. They don't have access everywhere to the inventory, and they usually have access to big wine, big brands, which they pay a fortune. I mean, 50% more than what it's worth, if it's not even two times. And so that has hindered a lot the way to move wine online. But the pandemic hit, obviously, it has change the behaviors. And I don't think you can go against the consumer's will too long. And consumers want to buy online now, and they want innovation. The one thing is, because the market was small and there was a lot of failures of moving wine online. I mean, it took wine.com 20 years and $140 million investment, if I'm not wrong, to reach, a decent position now of more than $300 million in sales, which at the size of the US, for the biggest players, not that big. So the consumer is finally moving online, but I think what you need to do, and this is what we are trying to do, is to have real added value, but really real innovation. If the only thing you do by putting in online is convenience, which is, okay, now instead of buying the shop, I buy online and I actually have the same choice problem. I have wine critic scores and now I have 2,000 or 20,000 labels to choose from. I don't think you're solving any, the choice problem at the same time.
Yeah.
So it is said that it will move 20 to 30% online in the next 5 years. So there is an important shift. I think the younger generations, what they want is a new experience. This is what we're trying to bring them with Palate Club. You want like a Netflix, Uber type of app and service for wine, where things get much simplified and accessible, but where you learn about your taste and where the complexity part doesn't become a burden anymore, but it becomes a learning, and where you're actually going much further away. Those services, we're not the only ones having innovations, of course, will unlock the market. And then obviously regulations are starting to unlock as well. The second question about elitist, that's a different question. People actually like to be part of a club or, like kind of exclusive access, and that is to wine. Our point is not to go against that necessarily, but is to go against the snobbishness, like typically the fake and the, I think, I show off because I know a little bit about this and that. And so I actually shut down other people which would like to know and to access, but, then they have the impression that's not for them because it's snob. So that we want to avoid, but that wine will remain at some point, and particularly when the wines get at very high level of quality, they're getting unfortunately way more expensive, and that's often in demand. That the fact that it's a good and expensive product, and that it's somehow a little bit of the elitist world, above like whatever $30 or $50. I think that's how the world is, and I don't think we can, fight that, or it's worth fighting.
Brilliant! I just love the whole way you're going about it. For our BV-TV Web30 special and BV-TV network, we travel in the world to talk with technology pioneers and innovators, people who have a firm vision of how that past 30 years of the World Wide Web will bring change for the better. I say cheers to that, and thank Nicolas Mendiharat for a truly inspiring interview. Thanks, Nicolas.
Well, thanks for having me.